Today I'm going to tell you 3 truly spine-chilling horror stories. Get your coffee ready, dim the lights, because here we go. Even though it was almost 20 years ago, I can still clearly recall my second year of high school science class. A large lab section with tables and extra chairs for most of the pupils was to the right of the rather typical science classroom, which had chairs and tiny desks at the front. We would spend time at the workstations once a week or so before beginning labs. I was the student in the class with the farthest back left seat, and I was sitting closest to the classroom entrance that led to the hallway. Even though I was a good student overall, science wasn't always my greatest subject. I used to become easily bored and let my mind wander during class, but today was different. I wasn't really paying attention since I was bored while the teacher was teaching, writing on the chalkboard, and doing other things. Instead of taking notes, I remember being bored and pacing the room in my mind. I briefly glanced at the classroom door and window to my left. It was one of those doors with a little vertical window. When I turned to look at the little vertical window, I saw a guy peering inside from the other side. I didn't identify him as a school teacher or anything. He was an adult man. His eyes were a little big when I looked at him, and he was looking directly into the room. He looked to be fooling around, but I didn't know who he was. I looked around at the other pupils, but they were all staring at the teacher and didn't see the person, or the location of the teacher obscured their view. I looked back to the man, who was still there, but he dropped down and vanished since shelving blocked the view of the entrance, making it impossible for the students to see it. I disregarded it and went back to taking notes, but it still seemed like a pretty odd thing. I wasn't really sure why the man did that, but I felt like it was a harmless joke. The man returned after about 10 minutes. I had been periodically scanning the window to see if he would come back. When he returned, he just began gazing at me. Since I was bored, I stared back. I turned away after a while, but he was still there when I glanced back shortly after. The man seemed weird and somewhat eerie, so I thought about contacting someone but opted against it at the moment. I didn't want to speak in front of the class and ruin the teacher's lecture, so I didn't say anything. The man disappeared again soon after. 5 minutes or so later, I tried again to pay attention to the teacher. After a short while, she announced that the school was closing. She switched off the lights and instructed us to get on the floor and under our desks until she could return. Then she locked the door to the classroom. I started to wonder if we were in lockdown because of the dude. I was also concerned that he would come back to the school. I remember that I informed some of the other kids about the person, and I remember them murmuring to each other. Although the lockdown seemed to last for a long 45 minutes, nobody initially seemed to know why it was in place. After a while, it was lifted, and we were permitted to go back to school activities. But in the end, I found out that a man in his adulthood had been chasing a girl. He followed her to the school, got inside, and hid while I was in my class. When the police found him hiding in the school, they caught the same man I had seen looking into the classroom. He was also under the influence of narcotics. The girl in my class had no idea who he was, and everyone was pleased that he had been caught. I find it strange that I saw him and that he was following her. I initially believed him to be a prankster, but I'm glad he refrained from attempting to enter our classroom. My grandparents' farmhouse was always a bit unsettling at night. It stood at the edge of a dense forest, with creaky wooden floors, dim hallways, and a silence that pressed in on you from every wall. One night, when I was around 13, I was staying over during the summer. My bedroom was upstairs, facing the tree line. I stayed up reading with a flashlight under the covers, unable to sleep because of the distant hooting of an owl and the occasional creak from the wooden house settling. Around midnight, I decided to head downstairs for a glass of water. As I descended the stairs, The entire house felt heavier somehow, like something was watching. I told myself it was just my imagination. I got to the kitchen and turned on the light. As I filled the glass, I glanced at the back door, which had a small window covered with a sheer curtain. There, I noticed the faint outline of a person standing on the other side of the door. I froze. My mind raced with explanations. Maybe it was my grandpa stepping out for a smoke, or a reflection, but something didn't feel right. The figure didn't move, just stood there, motionless. I slowly backed away, not taking my eyes off the door. The figure still didn't move. My heartbeat was thunderous. I ran back upstairs and shook my grandpa awake. He grabbed his flashlight and a rifle and went down to check. When we got back to the kitchen, the figure was gone. My grandpa opened the door and scanned the yard with his light, but there were no footprints on the dirt outside. Not even in the dew-covered grass. The next morning, he installed a second deadbolt and never said a word about it again. But every summer after that, I slept with the light on, always listening for footsteps on the porch. When I was 10 years old, my family moved into a century-old home in a quiet Midwestern town. The house had a cold, damp basement that my parents used for storage. I always hated going down there, even in the daytime. One afternoon, my mom asked me to grab a box of holiday decorations from the basement. I hesitated but eventually went down, flashlight in hand, since the bulb hadn't worked in weeks. The stairs creaked with every step. As I stepped off the last stair and moved toward the shelves, the beam of my flashlight caught something in the corner. A figure standing perfectly still. I gasped and dropped the flashlight. It rolled away, leaving me in partial darkness. I scrambled to pick it up, and when I shone it back toward the corner, nothing was there. Just boxes and old furniture. I told myself it was a shadow or my imagination, but my hands were shaking as I grabbed the decoration box. That night, I kept thinking about what I saw. I asked my dad to fix the light in the basement. He replaced the bulb the next day, but said the fixture was broken and we'd have to get an electrician. A week later, I heard noises coming from the basement in the middle of the night. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate ones. I froze in bed. I thought maybe my dad was down there, but the lights were still off. I quietly crept to the top of the basement stairs and listened. The footsteps stopped. Then I heard whispering, unintelligible but definitely voices. I bolted back to my room and hid under the covers. In the morning, I asked my parents if they were in the basement the night before. They both said no. We had the wiring checked. Nothing unusual. But after that night, I never went down there again. Not once. Even now, as an adult, I won't go near basements if I can avoid it. 3 different stories, 3 different dark secrets. So, what do you remember when you think of your own scary memories? Maybe you or someone you know has a story worth telling. What do you think? Do you dare? Follow, like, comment. I'm waiting.